Welcome to Theory of Productivity. I'm Jess Brown, and as somebody who has multiple sclerosis and also has to deal with work, I know how important it is to find strategies that are actually effective. So let's do that today and start making some movement. Okay, so today we're going to talk about productive decisions. Now, I'm sure you've heard about decision fatigue. That's something that's been thrown around a lot and maybe made popular by some of the antics of people like Mark Zuckerberg, how he has a wardrobe of all the same shirts so that he doesn't have to waste his precious decision-making resources on his choice of fashion for the day. Now, that might be kind of a silly example, and I do think it's maybe taking the actual science out of the decision fatigue phenomenon, but it still has a place in productivity. Now, decision fatigue, as far as I can tell, it can be about, having to make decisions all day, and it obviously is about the degradation of the quality of those decisions over time, but it also could be after a long process of trying to get to a decision, or any time where that mental strain, that cognitive load has been used up. It hurts our ability to make good decisions. Now, I don't think that choosing your shirt for the day is a decision that would even impact your decision fatigue. Yes, we can't escape decisions. However, there are a couple of ways that we can help improve our decision making and hopefully do it in a way that is more productive and overcomes this phenomenon of decision fatigue so that we can avoid just the mental load. I mean, who needs extra mental load, right? So there are a couple of things that I have been working on in my personal experimentation of figuring out what works for me, especially with MS that comes with cognitive load. I just have a depleted reserve of energy, and I want to dive in first with kind of an obscure one, maybe, especially if you're not so much a developer, kind of more on the creative side, but stick with me because I think this has application in stuff way beyond just programming. What I'm talking about is these settings or the config file design principle, I guess you could call it, of coding. You've seen this, right? You go to your SaaS product, you log into Gmail or, anything that you see on the web, basically, you'll probably have some kind of little settings file for your account that maybe it's simply managing that you prefer the dark theme, or that you want certain notifications through certain times or certain channels and not through others. You've got those kind of preferences built into this little product, and it remembers those settings. Once you've set them, you can forget about them. You don't have to decide on this anymore, unless you decide that you need to update those preferences based on a new context or new information or new strategy. The settings act as a single source for those decisions to be made and remembered and stored, so you know where they are. The other cool thing about the settings file is that you can then, if you know where your single source of truth is for these decisions, right? These minute, maybe more complex decisions. Maybe it's like a setting for these are your JPEG settings for the best compression, whatever that may be. So you could set those kinds of things into one little place, one file that gets referenced by your program or by your product that you're using. And that can help you reduce the mental load, first of all, of remembering what those settings should be. So I don't want to remember, is it 85 quality when I'm reducing down from a JPEG to WebP? I don't want to remember all of those little technical details. I want to put those in my settings file. I don't want to remember that you have to go into Gmail settings to add in, my signature or whatever it is. I'll just let them take care of it. I'll set it once, they take care of it the rest of the time. Settings can also be paired with logic. For example, if we are going back to this image converter, we've got a script that is getting random types of images and it's supposed to spit out a WebP version of them. So when it happens to detect that this particular image that it's working with is a JPEG, we're going to go to the JPEG settings and grab those settings from that settings file or config file and use that. And then the logic also says, oh, hey, this is a PNG, so I'm going to grab the PNG settings. And that's another way to, again, reduce the decision fatigue, because you have put your decision-making process into something that's repeatable. You have taken your framework where, hey, I know that a PNG needs to be set with lossless. I can do this myself and sort through all the PNGs. I'll put them here and then change the settings and output them. Or I can write a script that says, hey, if it's a PNG, do this. If it's a JPEG, do this. It's all based on my knowledge, my mental models, my understanding, and it uses a couple of those decisions, those little settings, to then put them in the right or the appropriate place when it encounters the right conditions. And that is super powerful. I've really seen that work super well with my scripts that I'm automating personally, but also as I think about maybe the real world, kind of like putting things in the right place. Humans have a great capacity for spatial memory. We remember stuff like where we put something. Sometimes that fails. Obviously, we are human, so it's not perfect, but that's why you can go into your sister's messy room and she'll claim that she knows exactly where everything is, even though it looks like a disaster to you. But your settings file in the physical world could be a matter of true organization where you know exactly where to go to put certain tools or to put certain things that help you get into that creative mindset. You have all of those things organized so that you can pull them out, you know where they are, you can go straight to them. That would be kind of a settings file in the physical world. Now, the next thing that I've been thinking about a lot is design systems. This applies really well throughout that creative work of having a system that allows you to reduce the decisions that have to be made on a constant basis. If you're designing a web page or a part of the product, this is kind of similar to that settings file where we have defined something that we can now just pull in. We don't have to think about, oh, which one should I use? Which line height should I use? You've already figured that out. And that's what's the beauty of the design systems, that you've done all the hard work up front, you made the decision, and now you can just keep using that decision everywhere else. And that means, again, reduced decision fatigue. There's a lot of ways that I think this applies, and I'm not totally sure how expansive this could be, but I'm really convinced that it's quite a powerful technique. All right, this last one I have been doing for years, and I'm trying to figure out what to call it. I've called it my pickup plan. And basically this is what I do at the very end of my day is I write a very quick thing. I usually just even put it in my personal Slack channel where I just write, here's the next thing that has to happen. I make the decision the night before or the day before of what needs to happen, what's the next step. And I actually leave it, I make sure that I leave something for me to finish up the very first thing in the morning. And apparently Ernest Hemingway actually had something fairly similar. I'll go ahead and read you the quote. He said, "The best way is always to stop when you are going good and when you know what will happen next. If you do that every day when you're writing a novel, or I would put any other project or task, you will never be stuck." I have noticed that when I do this, it makes it super, super easy for me to just pick up, get started. Sometimes it's hard to start in the morning, especially if you're trying to work on your own personal projects as well. This has really helped me with overcoming the motivation factor, the lack thereof in the mornings when you're trying to get to work, trying to start the day fresh. And also, sometimes if you don't have an idea of what needs to happen, it's really overwhelming because guess what? There's 100,000 options of what you could do right now. But since I've taken, the 2 minutes to just say, push this thing to GitHub, make sure that this goes live today, or run this script, whatever it is, I've left myself hanging on purpose at the very end of the day because it's not quite ready to go live. I'm not delaying it for no reason. What I am doing is I'm saying, this isn't quite finished. I'm going to stop here because I'm at a stopping point, and I'm going to remind myself what's the last thing or what's the next thing that needs to happen to get this project moving again. And that has been so phenomenally helpful for me because it's hard for me to remember where I left off. It's hard for me to get motivated to jump into work mode. And this technique helps get rid of all of that. And so again, that's reducing the decision fatigue because I've already decided the day before or the session before. I already know what needs to happen, so I can just execute. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is inaction. Decisions, those are all actions that we're making, we're taking. We have to think about what we're doing constantly. We're doing all of this mental effort. The big thing that we need to remember is taking a break from it, stepping back, because you're going to do this anyway. That's why you end up on your phone doom scrolling through your social media. That's why you end up bothering your coworkers with off-task chatter. That's why you end up getting distracted on that one article that you found, and that's why you wander around doing stuff that doesn't really matter, because guess what? That's how humans work. That's our biology. There's a reason that we sleep for a third of our lives, or at least ideally, right? If we're supposed to sleep for 8 hours a day, and we only have 24 hours, that's 1/3 of our whole day, aka our whole lives, that is totally devoted to taking a break. That's because our minds need breaks, and it's so important to do that. And now, I'm not entirely sure on the science behind this, but based on the idea that decision fatigue can happen after a long session of decision making and not just a full day of decision making, I think that's indicative that you got to take a break and step away and have that as part of your strategy. You shouldn't be shaming yourself for taking your 10-minute break, for letting your mind wander a little bit so that you can actually kind of recoup some of those cognitive resources. That's important. It's so important, and it's so left out of the conversation with productivity. I absolutely believe productivity happens in white space as well as that active space. We just really have to take care of ourselves, because by grinding, hustling all the time, from hour 0 to hour 24, it's absolutely unsustainable, and your quality of work is mediocre at best, if not constantly tanking when you do that, when you're constantly rushing, constantly hustling, constantly trying to do like a full focus, deep work thing throughout the whole day. It's just not even possible. So taking a break, taking a step back, that is so, so important, and will help refresh that quality of decision-making power that you have. And if you don't do that, you're going to see decision fatigue. Maybe it's chronic decision fatigue at that point, because I really believe that it would carry over time as you're constantly wearing yourself out, and that's not a good place to be. So I would love to hear your experiences as you try out these different techniques or strategies to come up with better ways to overcome or at least reduce decision fatigue, something we all deal with. Feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at notdefinedtech if you have any questions, or if you want to explain something that you've found helpful. I would love to hear about it. Thanks so much for joining me. Keep up the momentum. Until next time on Theory of Productivity.